You're live.
Good evening, everyone. We want to say thank you again for joining us on what is our weekly show. To start with, we're actually going to consider what is the frequency, the appropriate frequency, to make sure that everyone is able to tune in when necessary. And of course, the goal is always going to be to provide good information to everyone as they continue to ask questions. I've been actually pleased to hear many comments in the community already. Persons are starting to ask different questions, and so we're going to do our best to start to collate these questions on a weekly basis and then decide how best to provide information. I've said already that we're trying to use the various social media platforms to reach all of our voting audiences, and in addition to the normal written word. Tonight, though, as I sent out a message, I am extremely excited to be able to introduce to some and to, yes, and to others, to just mention that Ms. Angela Young is going to be our guest tonight. Ms. Angela Young was in fact the campaign manager for both 2017 and 2020. And as the election went on for both times, we joined between C7, Hamilton South, and also C9, which this year we were successful in working together to elect Vance Campbell. And so, Ms. Young, how are you?
Evening, everyone. I'm great.
Let's relax and know that it's going to be a good conversation. Yeah.
Yes.
So tell us first of all your background in terms of you, the marketing person, because when I contacted you, it was really about, can you assist me in the communications aspect of the campaign in 2017 again, and now 2020?
Sure. Well, in 2017 is my first time actually working on a campaign, so it was very exciting. I do love politics, so it was just a great marriage as far as I'm concerned. My background is almost 2 decades of marketing, integrated marketing communications. I've had 10 of those years spent in the US, working for major product lines. And so for me, it was more or less looking at the campaign manager role and realized there was actually a dual role, because the first one was more or less project management, and then the second one was more marketing strategy. So I was able to do that as well. People saying they can't hear, I'm sorry.
We're going to, as we go, we're going to obviously try to adjust as necessary so that people can hear everything that we're saying. And as Angela now goes through and makes some adjustments, we want to encourage persons to send in any questions or comments that they have. And we've already talked about the various platforms, and so you can send them in via Facebook. We have Instagram, WhatsApp. All of those will work, and you can directly send emails to Angela or myself. And again, we'll do our best to provide information. So Angela, you're busy waving to the crowd, but
Yes.
Let's go back now in terms of how you came to be working with us for both campaigns. And before you do that, by the way, let's go back in terms of, you say you're very interested in politics. Let's talk more about that.
Okay.
You and I first met many years ago.
Yes.
Won't say exactly when, but in the days when Progressive Youth was a very active arm of the PLP. And at that stage, it introduced some of us younger persons. At that stage, I believe we were probably around in our late teens, early 20s.
Yeah, 18.
And we were able to be exposed to the various politicians. One person I remember quite clearly would have been Mr. Alfred Wade.
Mhm.
And you remember, he was one that took time to make sure that the youth were never forgotten. And so
Yes.
whenever the PLP was putting on a function, he made sure there was a spot or a slot for the progressive youth.
Absolutely,
So
absolutely.
talk some more about your early days in politics, and then we'll come forward to you as a communicator, and then we'll come back to the actual campaign in 2017 and 2020.
Well, I have to talk about my early days in politics. I would definitely have to give a shout out to my father, the late Kenyatta Young, who was a trade unionist for 36 years at the BIU. And so growing up in Kenyatta's house was definitely pro-Black, pro-Bermudian, and also pro-female, to raise a strong Black female. And you can imagine in the 70s, my father would not let me have a white doll. That was out of question. He would not let me have any other books to read but Black authors. So I remember going to Berkeley and reading Malcolm X. He also made sure I was very conscious of what was happening. So my father had me involved in a lot of the industrial strikes in Bermuda. So definitely understood all of that. So I understood the struggle for our people in this country and the need for equality and opportunities.
Mhm.
And fast forward, it was a natural fit to get involved with Progressive Youth. I was very blessed in the sense where most people nowadays would have to read books
Mhm.
or Google to find about these great leaders. Like Lois Brown Evans, I knew her.
Mhm.
I knew Frederick Wade, Uncle Freddie,
Mhm.
Uncle Audie. I knew these people because they were my father's friends. So it was quite common for me coming up at 8 and 10 years old to attend Uncle Audie's house. And then there'd be some brainstorm meetings going on in the living room
Mhm.
with these great astute political minds. And I just happened to be there with Youssef going outside to pick peaches off the tree.
Well, okay, fair enough. Okay, so then let's fast forward now to, like I said, in 2017,
Mhm.
I still remember I called you up and said, Angela, could you come and assist me, please? And you obviously said yes.
Yeah.
And I will say that this time around, 2020, there was not the same immediate yes. There was a bit of a pause.
Yes, it
I
was.
think a 2 or 3 week pause. But again, we got to doing it. So
Yeah.
now let's talk about 2017 in the first instance. Based upon your recollection,
Yes.
how did it go?
I would say for 2017, that's about Progressive Youth. I just want to say with Progressive Youth, I was involved as far as secretary for that youth wing and also helping with the events. So Anika DeShields, I remember her speaking. We had basically a protest about lowering the younger vote to 18.
Okay.
We guys did that.
Gotcha.
And that was at Victoria Park. I'm very proud of that. So shout out to Anika, because she actually was the one who got up and spoke.
Mhm.
It was exciting times. So fast forward to 2017, when you asked me to get involved, that was something I definitely wanted to do.
Okay.
I saw it as a challenge and an opportunity for me.
Mhm.
And so as a marketing strategist, my premise was basically to look at you as far as the candidate
Mhm.
and helping to increase your brand and increase your awareness, particularly for those folks who didn't know you
Right. Mhm.
and those folks who did know you but may not have understood what you represented, particularly from a political standpoint. I mean, Anthony is very known as far as in the corporate, public, and private sector, but now he was stepping into the political arena. So what did that look like?
Okay.
And so for me, it was very important to make sure that I framed communication around you. So that was definitely content development. And so in 2017, looking at not just social media,
Mhm.
but also how to complement your canvassing. I think a lot of folks think canvassing is very critical, and it is.
Yeah.
But I also believe that it can be complemented with a multi-pronged approach. As I like to say in marketing, I want to hit all my sweet spots. I want to make sure every customer touch point will have the experience of the brand of Anthony.
Mhm.
So what does that look like? So it went from canvassing door to door, but how can we complement that? And so I introduced Anthony Says. That was a weekday of writings,
Mhm.
Monday through Friday, 7:30 postings. So again, was basically challenging you, the candidate, to look at what was happening in the political landscape
Yeah.
and basically speak to it. And sometimes I felt you were being too nice
Yeah.
or too kind. And I would say, no, Anthony, let's put a little edge to that one. Let's really push the envelope to make people think. I like to have it where it's basically, it would be the conversation around the water.
Mhm. Yeah.
Everybody's talking about it. And so what was Anthony saying today? So we built on that. We also had, going up with you, taking pictures, again, creating the content, telling the story. It was more than just about having ads or just putting up something, but basically strategically looking at what are we trying to hit, and also recognizing too, and it hasn't changed in 2020,
Right.
that is a very mature and aging population in C7. So making sure that they probably were not on social media.
Okay.
So for 2020, I introduced the YouTube channels and an e-newsletter. So folks who were not on social media may not have seen a lot of the videos
Right,
of what was
right.
happening on the Facebook, the Instagram lives, and the Zoom live. It was looking at how to complement that.
Mhm.
And one thing I do remember, the first meeting that we had
Mhm.
about a month ago,
It was 6 weeks ago.
6 weeks ago, my
Yeah.
goodness. And you said that you want to have an open house.
Mhm.
And there were some people in the camp that said no. And so I challenged that to say, why not? We could do something. I just
Yeah.
try to see what was the plan. And there wasn't one per se. And given in light of COVID, that definitely changed
Yeah, right.
things as far as what we can
Correct.
and
Right.
cannot do. And so I introduced the Zoom Lives.
Mhm.
So we basically turned the virtual clinics to a bi-weekly thing, which is very exciting.
Right.
And to look at the overall effectiveness of that was also very exciting, because there was an article last week, I think it was Tuesday,
It was posted on Burning News, actually.
the Post on Burn News, yes, about the 5 senators who are now MPs.
Mhm.
And there was one critique. A gentleman said that, Anthony Richardson didn't really speak to people, et cetera, et cetera. And someone countered him and said, wait a minute, I had a different experience and basically gave a litany of all the things they've been doing in the past 6 weeks, from the Facebook Lives, the Instagrams, the YouTubes, the e-newsletter, the Zoom, all of that, and they knew it, and your hotline, and also the shuttle. So that let me know that the marketing was working.
Right.
And we were getting the traction. We look at ROI, return on investment. So it was exciting to see that people were actually getting engaged, and it was evolving, getting better and better, going from strength to strength. And I think you said the other day, someone said they actually watched the last week's live
on Monday morning.
On Monday morning,
yes,
yeah, exactly.
And so actually contrast, because you just spoke about the, I guess the aging voter who may not have easy access to social media. Now contrast that with the young voter, because clearly the PLP, and I know through my canvassing, right, that there are many more young people. When I say young, those that are probably in the age category of 18 to, let's say, 20, 24, who have a different appreciation for communication.
Absolutely.
And in my mind, I guess it's going to be the Instagram.
Yes, they definitely abandoned
How would you address that? How would you describe or discuss the impact of, say, Instagram for young people, how important that is even during this election cycle?
With the older generation, they love canvassing. They want to see you face to face.
Right.
The younger voter, not so much. They're okay with it. They're more basically flexible, and they want basically be wired. Like, why do I have to come and see you?
Okay.
Can I WhatsApp you? Can I have a video? Can I have a live Instagram? You don't have to come to see me.
Right.
But is there another way to see you?
To make contact.
They don't have to be. You don't have to be physically in person with them.
Okay.
They're totally different. They want it quick. They want it fast, and then move on.
And actually, as we talked before in preparation for today, now talk about how the whole Instagram and different communication, the faster communication, I want to call it, also has an impact on, say, the corporate world or the non-political world, that's the way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're on there. Whether they're advertising, they're on there. So they're looking to see what messages are being played. They want to understand individuals. And in your case, it was basically trying to help the corporates to see who you are as a candidate.
Right, okay.
Is this someone that we can support? You know, what is his belief system?
Right, okay.
Yeah.
And one thing you don't know, by the way, is that a person told me today, well, Anthony, now, when I go somewhere or when I do things, your face keeps popping up. What's that all about?
Awesome.
And I think you can speak to the idea of, we don't want to, of course, tell everybody what we did, our quote-unquote secrets.
No.
But do talk about nowadays how you can advertise, for example, on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, and even on birthdays, by the way, and have an impact. Because what I'm trying to do now is have people understand, yes, the political piece, but also in an everyday sense, how they can now find opportunities for themselves to advertise and create job opportunities for themselves, if not for others.
Absolutely. The social media has definitely changed the game. It's no longer traditional, okay, I would do a radio interview or I will run an ad in the print paper. That's all changed.
Okay.
Because now anyone that has a cell phone, quite frankly, or a laptop or an iPad, instantly.
Right.
They're basically in front of an audience. And it's so much so, you have 3-year-olds doing demonstrations on their hair products.
Yes.
And they've become social influencers. And if they have 10,000 followers, they're getting paid for that.
Gotcha. Okay.
My daughter's friend, when they were about, I think, 14, 15, she was gaming. And I work with students, as you know.
Yeah.
And so parents sometimes criticize that. But that young lady, because of her gaming, she was getting paid to compete in games online.
Okay.
And there's people all over the world. The other powerful thing about social media is that sometimes I've worked with some clients, they may get a bit nervous when the live has very low numbers. But what I keep telling them is the replays that get very exciting.
Okay.
Because they have the longevity to always be there. And then with the YouTube, for those folks, the older generation who may not be on social media, but maybe on, a mobile device, a laptop, they can access it through the YouTube.
Okay, gotcha.
Right.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to touch base on, just ask a question, again, to have people know who you are, understand who you are, is this idea that sometimes you refer to yourself as numbers, and numbers, plural. Number.
Yes.
What's that all about? And by the way, I'm actually also, because if you recall, on this weekend, you were talking about, you said that one situation reminded you of your father. We talked to Mr. Jacobs. So give us some little snippet about that.
Yeah.
The question with you.
I see your question, Nicholas. I will answer that question. For those who don't know, most people think of Kenyatta as very strong and tough and very militant, and he was all of that.
Yes, for sure.
But at the end of the day, he was still my dad. And so we had some fun times, and my dad will always call me Number.
Okay.
And my dad, I don't know why he called me number, that's why he called me number.
Okay.
And another thing too was that he grew up and he's from Happy Valley. So my dad's a corn dog.
Mm.
And what I loved the most about my dad was whenever we were out somewhere, whether it was Atlantic Mall in Atlanta or somewhere in Chicago, he couldn't find me.
Right.
If he blew that whistle, that
Oh.
Happy Valley whistle, all roads stopped. And I knew
Fine.
exactly where he was.
Okay.
Or he'd be able to find me, I'll
Brilliant.
find him.
Okay.
So it was this affectionate moments. Yeah, I'm definitely Caroline. I'm a daddy's girl for real. I miss him. He's going now 5 years. And another thing too, my dad was also very politically astute,
Very much so, yeah.
mathematician, historian, but he was very cutting edge in his own way.
Okay.
So he knew about windmills and he understood about engineering. So I say all that to say, my dad gave my daughter, she was 3, her first screwdriver.
Ah.
And I was upset because with me coming up, it was
Girly,
always,
girly.
yeah, it was girly, but he had me doing Tuckerstown. My dad was a plumber by trade.
Mhm.
So he'll have me going with him at different sites. And I had to do the sticky stuff, the smelly stuff with the pipes and put them together, form a pass. And I hated it.
Go for mistake, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I didn't like it.
Okay.
So when he gave my daughter her screwdriver at 3, I was livid. Like, she's a girl to give him a screwdriver.
Okay.
And now fast forward at 18, I mean, she's competed in robotics and coding
Exactly.
competitions. She's now into biomedical engineering.
So brilliant.
So he saw something that the rest of us didn't see.
And I will go there now, but I do know, obviously, for you, the person also, you're obviously a very, very proud mommy. That's a good thing.
Yes, I am.
But before we go further, you want to take the question?
Yes, of course. Nicholas asks, what will you be continuing going forward in terms of the FB Lives, newsletters, etc.? Definitely. Now,
If I had to say there is one big thing we're going to do, is to establish the League of Champions.
oh yes,
And that's
I love
going to
that.
be to have each neighborhood volunteer their own person as opposed to a person being appointed to be that spokesperson for that neighborhood. And then we'll actually allow that to be the primary feedback from the community
Mhm.
to me, to the party, to the government, and then from the government to me, back to the community. So that's going to be a really big one. And we're also going to make sure that we have a few cycles between now and the next election whereby we go, and I say we, being me and my canvassing team, we will actually come and visit, the intention to visit every single household. And what we've done to start with is everyone should now know that our permanent contact information, primarily through email and WhatsApp or phone, the email would be arichardson@plp.bm.
Mhm.
And the phone number will be 538-8683, which is 538-VOTE. And the goal would be to have persons always be able to contact us so that it becomes a two-way stream, if you will. So yes, I will reach out to everyone,
Mhm.
but I do anticipate that there'll be the feedback and they are reaching out to me. And the other thing we'll be doing, which is much more visible, I suppose, is to continue with the monthly clinics.
Absolutely.
So far, we've used the parking lot across from Harrington Sound Dock, and we'll vary between that location and the location right in Davos Hill. And so that'll be, again, for us, a very key outreach, if you will.
So in other words, people, it won't be just a one-off. This will definitely has lots of legs. The longevity is there. The infrastructure is set up, and we'll keep it going.
Gotcha. And we have another question, actually, and I guess as good as Mamuda, sometimes we have persons that I want to say are shy and want to remain behind the camera. And so I'm going to encourage little Miss Isis to read the questions, but I'll take the first one, which is, are there documentaries that today's youth can watch on the BIU or the PLP history? The answer is yes, and that's the type of question we're going to take to provide in the future a detailed response whereby we will say, okay, fine, go to this email address or this location to find exactly what you're looking for. Interestingly enough, today I received, and many of you may have received the same thing, which was a short clip on Clyde Best. And it talks about him, first of all, being an excellent footballer, but more so the fact that today you may have discrimination in sport, but there are more team members to absorb the discrimination. In his day, it was just him having to receive the cat calls and all the rest of it. And one thing that really struck me today was he received a threat that if he played football, there was an acid in his face.
Wow.
He not only didn't tell anybody, he still played. And that speaks to the strength of the individual. And so you're right. What the PLP has done is we've started to rename certain streets and locations in Bermuda after those persons so that we never forget who they are. And so that'll be one way we're to do that. And certainly I want to encourage persons in the community to volunteer their own information because there are so many persons now that have a lot of information that and they're getting older, we want to make sure that that information is captured.
Absolutely.
And Miss Tina Evans, her last name is not Keynes anymore. I heard her on Shangri-La Durham show yesterday. She has also had a show whereby she's documenting people's oral history.
Awesome.
And so it encourages persons to look at CITV, for example, to get the information. So that is one way we're going to be doing it. And there are some fantastic books actually on the history of the PLP and the history of the BIU. And I won't call their names, but I know there are at least 2 prominent Bermudians that are in the process of writing books. Absolutely. And I've encouraged them both to carry that out because clearly documentation is important for us to know what the real history is. Because that's very, very important.
And just for some who are looking for books, Ira Phillips has one on the BIU history.
Correct, yes.
That's an awesome one. There's another one on Louis Brown Evans.
There's tons of books, yes.
Tons of books. Adiwell Simmons wrote one on Dr. Barbara Ball. So the information is definitely out there.
Yeah, Dale Butler's
Dale Butler's books as well, yeah.
So tons of books, right? Now, what is actually topical, I'm going to still stay on communication, but I'm going to, I guess, address as they say, the elephant in the room.
Oh boy, yeah.
Well, no, I mean, it's important because communication is critical, and the one thing for us, well, for me now, I guess, as elected politician, is to make sure that I'm prepared to answer or comment on those things that may be harsh, hard or easy or difficult, whatever it may be. And so, in this instance, Mr. Ralph Commission was appointed to be the Senate leader and also the Minister of Community and Sport, right? And we know, based upon what happened in the media, that he has now resigned.
Yes.
Now, factually, what we know is that initially, during the election cycle, he resigned as a candidate, and then Premier Burke appointed him as the Senate leader and a minister on Thursday. Factually, that we are aware of, is that the Premier did not know about all this information prior to Ralph being a candidate, Mr. Commission being a candidate, and once became aware, then Ms. Commission stood back. Clearly, on Thursday, we didn't think recognize the fact that we do make mistakes, and there has to be some element of forgiveness. And so recognizing that, the Premier, I'm sure, said, okay, fine, that's a point. But what I'm saying is very clear today is that the Premier did release a letter that was from Mr. Commission that says that Mr. Commission did not give the Premier all information prior to the appointment, for which he apologized. And now he has actually resigned. So that's what's in the public domain. And I wrote a piece myself in support of Premier Burke some time ago during the election cycle because of the $800,000 that took place, the loan for the dockyard. And I wrote the article or the short piece because I was commending him for the fact that there was no shirking of responsibility, the Premier. He took responsibility, he apologized for it, and then we move on. So I'm framing all that to say, how do you comment about what I would characterize as being crisis communication? Not about this situation, but generally speaking, how do you think, well, not how do you think, but how do you recommend that we deal with crisis communication? Heaven forbid, I have to have a situation during my campaign, during my 4 years, right? And I'll rely on you to them. So how do you advise me, if that's the right word now, about how to be prepared for a crisis communication if that arises?
Well, I just think, first of all, you have to own the situation.
Okay.
And get in front of the narrative and write your own narrative. So it was very smart of the Premier in the case of Ralph Commission to release the letter so that folks who had doubts that he didn't know beforehand say, listen, even Ralph admitted to, I didn't know.
Okay.
And just basically be prepared if someone is working on the PR side, be prepared for the questions that may come up after he had resigned. You know, what may come up, and be prepared to answer that and have that conversation. I think that's also very important.
Okay, great. So your advice to me is going to be, Anthony, in the instance of a crisis, as you may call it, earn it and be prepared, apologize, and be prepared to answer any questions that may arise from that after the actual resignation. Okay, fine. What I'll do also, what I want to do, what I also want to do is provide some information for the questions that I have been asked already, and that is, how does it work politically in terms of members of parliament, ministers, and Senate persons, right? So,
Oh, okay.
so what happens in the beauty contracts is that we have 36 constituencies
Mhm.
or 36 seats.
Yeah.
Within each one, there is an estimated 1,200 voters. And what happens is every 5 years, the boundary commission will go and review the boundaries
Mhm.
to try to reallocate if people move along quite a bit. And so to start with, the election, you have an opportunity to run 36 candidates. In this past election, the PLP ran one candidate in each constituency. The OBA ran 31 in 31 constituencies, and the new FDM ran 15.
Yeah.
Right? Based upon the election results, as we all know now, the PLP won 30 seats, which means that 30 of the PLP candidates became members of parliament.
Yes.
From that group, the premier has the responsibility, the legal responsibility, to actually appoint his ministers.
Mhm.
The premier being one and plus 12. And so he then goes and appoints ministers to the various portfolios. He also has the authority and responsibility to decide what those portfolios are.
Yes.
So for example, we have a minister of finance, we have minister of education, minister of health,
Mhm.
and those are some of the.
National security, so, yeah.
And then for the Senate, what happens is the Senate consists of 11 persons in total. 5 of those persons are actually appointed by the governor upon the recommendation of the premier. 3 are appointed by the governor.
As independent.
Well, yes, independent. But first of all, there's 3 appointed by the governor upon the recommendation of the leader of the opposition.
Mhm.
And then 3 are appointed by the governor, which are intended to be independent. And at this stage, as you know, the Senate president is your aunt,
Yes, Jim
Yes.
Dillis Wright.
Ms. Dillis Wright, who I've known for quite a while now, primarily when I was on the hospital board. And so you have a total of 11 senators.
Mhm.
And then in the instance of a vote, whatever's being debated or being considered has to receive a majority of votes. And so what happens is, technically, the PLP, right now is the government,
Mhm.
their 5 senators will normally support the legislation. And then if the independents support it, it'll go through because, well, let's just say, for example, there's disagreement. If the government 5 vote for it, opposition 3 vote against it, the 3 independents, if all their votes go against it, then it'll be 6 against 5 and it will not proceed.
Mhm.
And so persons have asked before in terms of what's the point. The point is that those 3 independent senators do hold sway in the Senate because if they vote against it, whatever's being proposed would not pass.
Exactly.
The exception there would be that any bills that are finance related, the Senate does not have the authority to turn those back. But anything else, they can't turn back. Yeah, and so the Senate does
Why
have
not
a
the
very critical role.
finance?
Because legally, or constitutionally, there is no authority to do so. Because the elected members of parliament have that authority and that right, so it doesn't turn back. And so that's what actually happens. And the other question has arisen is, what about the portfolios? As I said earlier, the premier will assign the portfolios to each of the ministers, and then for the senators, the government senators at least, they will be assigned portfolios as junior ministers.
Yes.
And so what you find is that the senators will probably have like 3 portfolios. I might be the junior minister, for example. I was junior minister of home affairs, education, and community affairs, which makes it seem as though the senators have a lot of extra work because, again, there are 5 government senators and maybe 11, 12, or 13 government ministers. Yeah. What's important this time around is that the government has many, many backbenchers. And what the premier did is he asked us all what our preferences were or our actual interests.
Mhm.
And then based upon that, he used the information to assign to us additional responsibility to support the ministers.
Okay.
And so I'm not going to review right now because I don't know what his intention is going to be about when he's going to actually announce those things. But I know, for example, that I am going to be assisting one of the ministers. And so it's not as though the non-ministers don't have anything to do.
That has come up a lot.
Correct.
Yeah.
And what we will find is that there were 36 persons, 36 PLP candidates. You have 30 that were successful, 3 were appointed to the Senate,
Mhm.
and we'll know soon what the other 2 will be doing.
Okay.
And so all 36 will be involved in responsible positions this time around. And so that's the goal. And what's going to be important for me is as we continue to have questions is to then refer specifically to certain aspects of our constitution or the government so we understand how it works.
Mhm.
And what we're going to do so the audience understands is we're going to find a methodology whereby we can actually, for example, use a whiteboard or a chart to display information so they can see. And I can
Oh,
write it
great,
down, for
yeah.
example, right? So when I explain things or you explain things or our guests explain things, they're able to write it
Mhm.
and hence the ability for a person to understand. So that's going to be very, very important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Or we probably have PowerPoint slides.
Yes, I'm
Yeah,
saying
to share the screen.
correct, which may assist going forward.
Yeah.
So, having said that, let's now go back a bit in terms of trying to broaden it not just about politics, but
Mhm.
also about this communication thing. Because, as I said earlier, we have a lot of young people. Now we know that one of your business enterprises is Kicks.
Mhm.
Now explain a little bit about that, because I know from experience that it's definitely very beneficial.
Okay.
And I know I've seen many young males come to that process. So let's talk a bit about, number one, what is it?
Okay.
How did it start? And how do you see it being successful in impacting our young people?
Absolutely. Thanks for that. KICS is actually an acronym for Kids in Control Systems. I
Okay.
launched the business, oh my goodness, 6 years ago in light of my own daughter struggling to master M1.
Oh,
Yes, after her first year, and I had her assessed,
Mhm.
and she has ADHD clinically mild. And so my personal preference, I don't believe in the first defense
Mhm.
being medication. So
Yes.
I chose not to medicate my daughter. I want to look at different tools that will help her basically be successful. And in that process, I developed different executive function tools to help me organize from her planner, from filing systems, set up her room, and so forth. And then I realized that other students at that time, there wasn't many resources in Bermuda,
Mhm.
that people actually were looking at us. And so I decided to launch a business. So it's actually I Aspirations Limited, and the products are called KICS,
okay.
Inspiring Students to Aspire for Greatness. So in the 6 years, I've helped, oh my goodness, 260 students. Yes, from
Okay.
M1 up to a couple of freshman students,
Mhm.
and doing that virtually. So I was doing Zoom 4 years ago, quite frankly, because I had clients in Switzerland, I had clients in Florida, and a couple of clients in New York. And so I was doing that. And you mentioned the boys. I definitely have a heart for the boys. I'm hard on my boys, and I definitely want to push them. As a matter of fact, I saw one on Thursday in town. He shouted out to me across the street, "Hey, Miss Young, that's you." I was like, "Wait a minute." His S2 now at Barkley.
Okay.
And so one of the things I know with boys is that they need structure,
Mhm.
they need guidance, and they need to know what is their limit, so to speak.
Mhm.
So I had one student, actually a couple of boys, were telling me how they were falling asleep in classes at
Right.
Cedar Bridge. And I said, "Why, you playing Fortnite?" "Yes,
Mhm.
yes." So I had to help the mom basically implement rules for these boys. So basically, take away the Wi-Fi, take away the devices, and you're in your bed at 8 o'clock.
Mhm.
They were like, what? Then a week, they did that, they started paying attention, and they noticed an improvement in their performance at school. So, and I have a couple of students now, about 3 boys right now on football scholarships.
Mhm.
One was in Costa Rica last year for IB, another one in Japan for IB. So I'm pretty proud of them. They're doing quite well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk a little bit about schooling because I know that you have had a positive impact on the children and their study habits and whole nine
Yeah, both
yards.
public and
Is
private.
good.
Mhm.
And let's talk about the actual school system for a minute because I'm one of those that believe that society now says that private school is inherently better than public. I don't agree with that at all.
I
to
don't
be honest.
either. I don't.
But I know your daughter went to private school,
Mhm.
and so it's obviously a personal choice. But talk to me about your experience and the differences, and what you see as being the value of parental involvement in a child's education, and how that assists them in progress.
Absolutely. Parental involvement is paramount. As I tell my clients, strong parents
Mhm.
produce strong students.
Okay.
So being a vigilant parent, not being the one that just basically waits for the system to tell you what's needed, but being proactive.
Mhm.
I think the third day of Cameron being at BHS, she transferred from Petra Primary, I saw red flags. Whereas she wasn't putting things in her planner, the day of was actually the following week.
Okay.
And that was the third day. So I immediately called in for a meeting with the head of department. That's how I am.
Yeah.
And so we had a meeting. I talked about it. I said to her, I do not want surprises come December and my child is failing.
Okay.
I need to know, like right now, what can we do to help her and help support her? I think also being a vigilant parent, especially those children who have a learning disability, get the proper tests. So then when you have the proper test in hand, you can go into the school system and say, I have an IEP, an individualized education program or plan, and they will respect it. But you just come in and complain and you may or may not get results.
Okay.
I remember, I'll just say it, at one primary school, there was a teacher I felt that was underperforming as far as I was concerned, and I demanded a change and have my daughter move to another class. And it happened.
Okay.
That's the kind of parent I am. I'm hands-on. It can be exhausting, and parents look at someone like a Cameron or your Jordan or Callan, you know, our kids are doing quite well, and they wonder, you know, I would have that same thing. But I tell parents, that's not through osmosis.
Yes.
It's a lot of work.
Right.
You know, it's understanding. And I also tell parents when I speak at PTA meetings, do you have a plan? What does success look like to you? Can you articulate that? Does your child know that? And is that very clear for your child as they matriculate through the years? Do they understand what that success looks like? And I say to my parents, middle school parents, don't wait till that child to hit S1 or S4 for them to become involved in the community and giving them exposure. I said, by the time your child reaches S1, they should have at least a one-page resume. Parents are shocked by that, but it is doable. And I also want to add, too, the importance of the community. When we were coming up, the village definitely played a role. And I would say church is huge as far as gaining experience, hands-on experience. And with Cameron, for instance, I noticed she was very good with technology. And so when she no longer wanted to do certain things at church, I said, okay, well, fine, you can help out with the PowerPoint presentations and putting up the slides and stuff like that. So she gained valuable experience, and that in turn was community hours, and that in turn led her actually being Connect Tech, you know, so it just kept growing.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's actually quite interesting, because a lot of times now what happens is, I believe, we criticize the involvement or lack of involvement of the churches and the impact on society and all those kind of things. But you did not know this. But similarly for my son, actually, as he became able to focus on the message, right, understand it, but also I think sometimes become like not as focused for an extended period of time, the solution was, okay, don't just sit in the service, get up and get involved.
Absolutely.
And he got involved in what we call the media ministry. And as a result, you'll be surprised how much they will be more motivated to go there for whatever they're doing. So in this case, for the media focus. But in doing the media focus, it was amazing that he's obviously taken in the service.
Absolutely.
And so now what happens is he will be moving around, but he can recite for sure, or not recite, he can explain the 3 major points of a given sermon.
Yes.
And so for today, actually, that's one of those light bulb moments, actually, in terms of parents. Certainly, if you attend church or are Christian, it is one way to keep your young people involved. And also for those in the audience who may be Christian leaders themselves, pastors or otherwise, what they can do is ensure that they get the young people involved in other aspects of the service to ensure that they are there.
Absolutely.
Because we know for sure, you know, at least if they're in the building, then that's going to have a positive benefit. And so that's a good.
And I also tell my students, as you said, Christian students, I tell them, you know, God's given you talents,
Gotcha.
and they must be used to His glory. And so I always try to challenge them. If you could do that for football, you can be there on time for that, but you can be on time for church because we have this activity going on. We need you here for this. And so I always try to encourage young people to get involved and recognize that, hey, it doesn't necessarily mean you can be the usher.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean you're gonna be the one that's going to be preaching, but you could read the announcements.
Yeah. Okay.
You can help with the media team. There's so much you can do. In Cameron's case, she was a junior teacher for Sunday school.
Okay.
And that ended up coming basically full circle at Beauty, where she was a camp assistant.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you mentioned your daughter Cameron a couple of times, actually, and we talked, I think, off air maybe last week or so about the fact that there is the market, if you will, is no longer Bermuda. It's a worldwide market.
Yes.
And this is part of that. And by the way, for those who are listening in the various media, one of the encouragements for us is that there are persons off island that watch these presentations or these live broadcasts.
Absolutely.
And clearly, when it comes to whether it be Facebook or anything really,
Any channels,
that
yes.
people can anywhere listen to. So I want to give a shout out to those that are actually overseas.
I know I have folks in London, I have my folks in Dallas, I have my folks in New York, I have my folks in Bahamas. Hi. But I also want to add something too, Anthony. You made a very good point as far as parents. I think a lot of times, particularly those parents who are very I mean no disrespect to this, but very solo and silo in their thinking,
Mhm.
is that I want them to appreciate this generation is basically called Gen Z.
Mhm.
This generation, which your son is part of, my daughter's part of, Bernadette's daughter part of, they are multitaskers.
Yes.
So they can go into a building and you're thinking they're not paying attention and they're on their phone, but they're actually absorbing everything else that's going around them.
Quite an irritation, but yeah.
It is an irritation. And they can actually explain what's happening, but they also have different strengths.
Mhm.
And so I think it's encouraging for parents to allow our children to explore those strengths. And I say Cameron because that's my live example.
Yes, yes.
So Cameron has 7 different strengths. So I've never basically deterred her from that. I've always explored all of them. And so, and no, again, no disrespect, but it's bigger than just basically packing groceries. I've always said to Cameron, use your intellect to monetize and create opportunities for yourself.
Okay.
So with Cameron, it was basically, okay, you're good in tech, you like in coding and robotics. She ended up working for Connect Tech.
Mhm.
She was in Spain for a year. She was doing virtual teaching
Yes, okay.
with Connect Tech. From that, she launched a business, I guess, based on her mom being an entrepreneur. She launched her own business doing Spanish tutoring.
Yes, okay.
So she has clients in Bermuda, but she's actually based in London. So it's basically exposing our children to the possibilities
Yes, okay.
of what can happen. And I find also too, a lot of times with university graduates, I was actually talking to someone on Friday,
Mhm.
is no longer looking in the paper for a job. And I say this to adults across the board. Basically, what skill sets do you have? And can you monetize them? Can you create opportunities for yourself? Do you know how to market yourself? You know, use those critical thinking analysis skills that you've learned in business school or whatever the case is, but use it for yourself while you're looking for work.
A quick second, because
sorry, that's
sometimes,
different.
no, that's fine, no, because sometimes we use terminology that person doesn't understand, right? Or that I think we just sometimes brush over,
Mhm.
and certainly we don't intend to offend anybody, but tell me then, what does it mean to monetize myself, or monetize, what does that
Right.
mean?
Basically, how can you create revenue? How can you get paid for those skills?
Okay, gotcha.
If you're a makeup artist, how can you get paid for that? If you do hair, how can you get paid for that? If you are a dancer, how can you get paid for that? But
Okay.
as being an instructor, if you are a chef,
Mhm.
how can you get paid for
And
that?
actually brilliant, by the way, there's Chef Simmons, got his first name actually, who was in the paper, on Damien, right? He was in the paper on today's Sunday, maybe Thursday or Friday,
Mhm.
about the fact that because of COVID, his job had laid him off and he was at home.
Yeah.
And what he's done now, as you say, and as we know now, is what he's done to monetize his culinary skill set is he now does personal chefing, as he called it, right? Which
Absolutely.
means that so now if Angela is having a dinner party for 2 to 15, I think he said, you don't feel like the hassle of cooking.
Right.
Or you may not know how to cook.
Yeah.
Or may not be a good cook. You can call him up, have a discussion with him, and he'll come and cook in your kitchen.
Absolutely.
And the beauty is that through that discussion and what do you want and the ingredients, whatever, you get to know him. And clearly, you actually enjoy the food more if you know cooking.
Absolutely.
Is that
And
right?
just to add on that, I think COVID was a blessing in disguise.
If we choose to make
If
it.
we
Yes.
choose to, because a lot of times the business in Bermuda, how long we had Uber?
Mm.
Uber's been around for a couple of years,
Mm.
but Bermuda wasn't there yet.
Yes.
And so you had just, I think Lindo's launched their online shopping last year. Same with Marketplace early in the year. And then we had curbside pickups for the
Yes.
restaurants.
Right.
All of this stuff should have been in place a couple of years ago. And I think that Bermuda, it tends to be very comfortable.
Yes.
And so I always try to challenge my students to come to my workshop, particularly, and I say to them, do I Inc.
Mhm.
Create you.
Yes.
What is your brand?
Mhm.
You know, what can you offer, again, that you can monetize and create revenue for yourself? And I think that's something that we have to encourage with the younger people
Yeah.
and teach them how to do that.
And actually, to give a
Got 15 minutes after.
No, but that's to give a political piece on that, right? Is that I know that many of the candidates were, let's just say, a little bit older.
Mhm.
We're not totally familiar with social media,
Mhm.
myself included, actually. And so, just as you came on board, and then she's probably going to tell me not to mention her name, but Miss Cynthia Jones,
Yeah.
for example, came on board. Miss Bernadette came and assisted. Miss Tucker came to assist, and now her daughter's here, Isis.
And Che and
And
me,
those, yeah,
Denzel,
There were
David,
several persons.
several, yeah.
There was Maxida assisted us.
Vanessa.
And Vanessa. So there are a lot of people that actually came to the fore to distribute or display their skill sets.
Absolutely.
Some of them have full-time jobs, and so they don't necessarily do these things, quote unquote, on the side. But I know there was at least one other candidate, there was actually two other candidates that found young people who were able to do these things like just on the fly.
Oh my goodness.
And one person in particular was actually unemployed. And so now they've been able to create a business by providing social media services to some of the candidates.
Yes.
And then once that takes place, they're able to say solidify those, say, 3 or 4 clients to cover their core expenses, and then have time to branch out.
And that's what that, yes.
So let's say that right now, if there's anyone that's even listening to us, think about that. Because what you may think, and I guess my advice would be, what do you enjoy? What comes easy to you?
What's your passion?
Exactly. And then those 3 things, then once you have that in your mind, right, it'll be a matter of, okay, fine, how can this somehow be used to generate income for me? You mentioned offhand, actually, that there was a person, one of your daughter's friends, who was able, through gaming, to be employed. And as we know now, many, if not most of those young people, they spend days and hours
Yes.
using, as I call it, Xbox, Obox, and otherwise, meaning all those things, right? And no one would have actually thought that they can be used as influencers for marketers to test their products.
Yep.
And so I think, again, that should be an encouragement.
And I think also too, for those of us in marketing, recognize the importance of having your own collateral and having your own portfolio per se. So even though you may be working as an intern or you're volunteering your time, that is still tangible experience and expertise. And so now you have a portfolio that you can say, and it's tangible, and you can show the results of that. X, Y, and Z. I actually worked on this project. Here were the objectives, and here are the deliverables. Here are the results. This is what I saw change. For instance, in 2017, Anthony, you lost by 21 votes. It hurt my heart. It still hurts my heart.
Mind you, by the way,
It still hurts my heart.
For that little marketing, I did not lose.
Okay.
The result was a difference.
The result was a difference. If we go to PR spin, okay, fine. The result was a difference. We'll leave it at that. And then fast forward to 2020, you actually, you won by 104. It's fantastic.
Yes. And I guess going back a bit to the whole political piece of it, right, is that, well, I gotta give a shout out actually to Dr. Robert Warner. Because you may not recall, but in 2017, there was the question or the politically fine, the PLP had never won the seat, right? And obviously, every time there was election, we did have a candidate there, and sometimes that candidate that had actually lived in the area.
Yes.
And so there was this, I wouldn't say, well, there was this maybe a bit of a lull, maybe even a bit of a malaise actually, whereby, okay, fine, you're gonna run in the seat, you're gonna do your best, but absent the actual full belief that the seat was winnable. And I've told you and others, and I'm saying it publicly now, that one of the differences in 2017, although my fault it happened a little bit later, was Dr. Warner called me one day. And I clearly remember the phone call because he said to me, Anthony, the seat can't be won. And I'm saying, are you sure? And he went through a numerical analysis to explain to me why. And as you say, we definitely did accelerate our program a little bit in 2017, but I think started a little bit too late. But at that point, what I'm trying to emphasize now, though, is that the idea of believing in your project, whatever you're doing, in my case, of course, was the campaign in 2017, now 2020. But it can be whatever anybody has as an idea, is very important. And I can say without a shadow of a doubt that this time around 2020, there was, for me, no doubt that the seat could be won. And as a consequence, what I made up my mind to do was to leave no stone unturned. Yeah? And part of it also, which you do know about this, was, and I'll also give a shout out to MP Wayne Fabric, because he said, Anthony, for the next, I think it was like 4 or 5 weeks, there is no sleep.
Yeah.
And what that meant was that based upon between canvassing, between strategizing, between looking at information and analyzing, that the sleep pattern became totally unusual, unregulated. So some nights 2 hours sleep, some nights 3, sometimes 5, sometimes 1. But that was what was necessary. And so I'm saying that to say that when people have ideas that they believe in, sometimes it's the belief that gets them over the line.
Absolutely.
And again, I knew this time around, it was for me, definitely belief. Certainly, I want to say that it is probably impossible to name everybody that played a role but there are many that did play a role. And what I'm going to try to do with your assistance actually is to go back and make sure we identify all those persons so that no one feels slighted by being mentioned or not being mentioned. But it is a process, and so far we've actually interviewed, as you know, Mr. Roddy Burchell, who played a key role in the canvassing. And you also mentioned, of course, from number 9, Mr. Jacobs.
Yes.
And if we not compare, but if we mention both of those two right now, those are under all descriptions, veteran canvassers.
Absolutely.
And each of them wanted to have opportunity. They said they're going to retire, and we will see about that. But they wanted to ensure that at least they had victories before they lessened their active door-to-door canvassing.
What you can see, folks, is my shirt says faith. And so I recall saying to Anthony, this is my basis, this is who I am, it's my faith.
Yes.
And I truly believe Anthony had it in the bag for 2017. And it wasn't too later he told me that he wasn't there yet. And I share that to say that's very important, as Anthony said earlier, as far as belief. You know, the Bible says faith without works is dead. So even though you may not get it the first time, just keep trying and keep trying again. I like to mention Mr. Gregory Jacobs and even Roddy Burchell, because sometimes they canvass by themselves in C7 and C9, and there had not been a winner, but they had the faith to believe, I just keep trying it. The next election, I'm gonna try it again. The next election, I'm gonna try it again. And so it was great for both of those two individuals to retire in 2020, knowing that their candidates for PLP actually won. Vance Campbell for C9 and Anthony Hare for C7. It was a powerful moment for both of them. And I also want to say too, Anthony, to your credit, it's important because you were open to different things as far as the social media. It was very challenging for you.
To the crazy lady.
Hey, it works.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah.
I got the results. Long word, but I got the results. As I told everybody, I'm going to win the election. That's that. But you were open to the ideas. You didn't shy away from them. For those folks who are not comfortable with that, because they may be stuck in their ways of how they should operate, how they should happen, they may miss an opportunity. So you were very open as far as ideas, involving the younger generation involved as well, so that they had an idea of how does this whole political machine operate. And I think it's very exciting because PLP definitely has a very impressive political machine for folks. Even Miss Connie. Yes. So I think that's also very exciting. So credit to you, Anthony, as far as being open to different experiences and different challenges on top of what you knew you had to do. But to get up and provide us with, oh my goodness, 2 minutes, Anthony, to provide us with articles every morning, Monday to Friday, no easy feat.
You're right, and as I said, that was it was exciting. A challenge though for sure to have it all ready to be able to be posted. But it is what was necessary. I'm happy that we did it. There's no question about that. And again, in terms of those who are still listening to us or in the various media, just want to really emphasize that on a go-forward basis, we're going to make sure that you challenge me and I in turn challenge you. The phone number is going to be permanent now at 538-8683. And we've done that because we want to have some permanence. And that phone is just used for PLP purposes. And so whether I have the phone or someone else has the phone, they'll always be able to answer it and know that it's going to be from a constituent. That's all that phone is used for. And similarly, we have the separate address, which is a.richardson@plp.bm, because we want to make sure that persons can always reach. And then on a social media point of view, I posted on Facebook today that even though I say it's a preferred way, send me a WhatsApp, that's only because for me, it's an easier mechanism to respond to. And I also believe that you can send a WhatsApp message whenever you want, 24/7. I may not answer it at 1 in the morning, for example, but at least I know what the messages are, and I'll make sure that I do answer them. And then, thankfully, the team has been encouraged, if not coerced, to ensure that we continue on. And so we're going to ensure that all of these social media opportunities do also remain. So whether it be Instagram and otherwise, we'll make sure that we carry that on. What we have to do now is to decide the frequency of the lives, because the once a week may not always continue, but it'll be at least once a month. And what I would encourage persons to do is send us information, right, to let us know what your thoughts are in terms of the frequency and also the time. At the moment, we have it set at Sundays at 6:30 because we believe that's a time when parents, for example, may be ironing clothes or whatever, and they can just tell us on live and listen to us as we're going through. But clearly, we're open to potentially change the time a little bit, maybe a little bit later. I think maybe a little bit early, depending on what people really believe. But the day will likely stay the same, Sunday, because we believe it's important. It starts the week right, and it gives us a chance to consider whatever has happened during the week. The goal is going to be to provide information, but also to comment, if appropriate, on anything that happens to be happening in Bermuda. From the government, the PLP side, we're going to make sure that we explain our platform and bring information around to the public in terms of any legislation that's being passed, but also the government's economic agenda. We know that that's going to be critical going forward because the pandemic is still in process, but we've had very good experience as far as that's concerned. But next is going to be the economic recovery. And so the government, the premier, the PLP team have lots of goals to put forward to ensure that we deliver. And my role, my chosen role, is going to be to explain those things as we receive information or questions so that people are fully informed. And as I was told today, if we are properly informed about these things, we are better positioned to make good decisions in terms of governance going forward, but more importantly, to ensure that the government is kept abreast and aware of what you as the voters and constituents want us to do. And that way we can be much, much more responsive. So again, in closing, I want to encourage you to contact us. Remember, if you are prepared to be a volunteer leader, I think sometimes we shy away from that, but we're looking to establish a League of Champions, which is going to be persons in each community will be self-selected, not me appoint them, but self-selected to be the spokespersons in that community. And I think it's going to set a tone for Bermuda once we get everything working properly and it is in place. And so on that note, I want to say again, thank you to everyone. At this stage, the media team that's here today, I cannot make a mistake about that. Obviously, we have Angela as our guest. We have Santia Jones, who has been just there all the time. We have, I want to say little, but she's not quite little, which is Miss Isis Tucker and Miss Bernadette Tucker, who is her mother, who tries to stay way in the background as she rolls her eyes now, but we will keep on working with her because it's important, I believe, to make sure that we recognize presence. And again, we're going to have one other thing, which is going to be a celebration for C7 and C9 for the whole community. And we're now working on those details to make it happen. And so again, for this today, October the 11th, I'll say thank you to everyone, and we'll obviously give you information about our next live session when we decide to do it. So thank you, and to Ms. Angela. Thank you very much.
It was great.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Night, everyone.
Good night.